In the mid-1980s, the popularity of the X-Men was sizzling. We had 2 ongoing X-Men books, and Bob Layton pitched the idea of a 3rd, reuniting the original 5 X-Men. And Chris Claremont, who had authored the X-Men for the last decade, was not happy about this. Jean Grey had died in the Dark Phoenix saga, and bringing her back likely seemed like a slap in the face to Claremont. To be fair, Claremont didn't want Jean to die whenever he and co-plotter John Byrne were laying out the Dark Phoenix saga. But I imagine Claremont had grown to appreciate the tragedy of Jean's death, so bringing her back felt cheap. So when Claremont found out about plans to resurrect Jean, he came up with an alternative solution. Keep Jean Grey dead and bring Jean's older sister Sarah Grey into the team. In Bizarre Adventures 27, Sarah Grey, previously non-powered, was kidnapped by Atlanteans and her genes were altered and then restored to normal. Claremont suggested Sarah wasn't returned to normal and that she developed abilities from this incident. Apparently, Editor-in-Chief Jim Shooter liked the idea, but not enough to go with it. The wheels were in motion. Nothing could stop Jean Grey coming back and completing the reunion of the original 5 X-Men. But what if they used Claremont's idea? Would this have been better? I'm gonna say, yeah! I agree with Claremont that reviving Jean cheapens her death, especially the way she was brought back. Nowadays, it's nothing for a character to die and come back a month later. It happens so often, I've completely inured myself to character deaths. Even if it's a character I like, I know they will be back before I can say hackneyed writing. But in the 1980s, characters didn't die like they do now, and they certainly weren't brought back if they were killed. When someone died, it was a big deal. So to bring Jean back for any reason is cheap, especially when the only reason was to get the band back together. And while I appreciate the Dark Phoenix saga, the ending doesn't hold the same weight when you know that's not Jean, but an energy space bird who put Jean in suspended animation, created a duplicate body, and hypnotized herself into thinking she was the real Jean. That's so stupid, and yet they had to do this to satisfy Jim Shooter's command that a planetary serial killer not go unpunished. I'm not naive enough to think Jean would have stayed dead forever. A founding member of the team who is central in one of the biggest X-Men stories of all time, of course they were going to bring her back. But when I think of this from an artistic point of view, the way they did it just feels so corporate-minded. They didn't even have a story to tell with Jean once she was back. Just, she's back now. My gut instinct is to say using literally any character instead of Jean in the formation of X-Factor would have been an improvement. But Sarah Grey might be one of the least developed characters in the Marvel Universe. I've been reading X-Men for 20 years, and I think I've read maybe 2 issues with Sarah Grey. She goes missing off-screen in X-Factor issue 12, and it isn't until X-Men issue 36, 7 years later, that we found out she died off-screen. That's how unimportant Sarah was. It'd be different if she had been around a lot before the formation of X-Factor. She hangs out with her sister when the X-Men listen to Bernard the Poet. She's the token normie human. Iceman or Angel has a fling with her. Eventually, she finds out about the group being mutants, and she's worried for her sister's safety. Give her some kind of role to play. Then, if she feels like an established character when X-Factor comes together, she can say she never forgave Scott for Jean's death. Conflict is at the center of every story, and this would have been a wellspring of potential conflict to mine from if they had gone in this direction. In theory, I would have preferred this over bringing Jean back. I won't say every issue after Jean's return was soiled in my mind for air quotes ruining the Dark Phoenix saga, but I also won't say Jean had very much to do in most of her appearances in X-Factor. She's pretty important in the Inferno story, but that's one of my least favorite X-Men stories, so not sure if that's a win for her character. So yeah, this is a yes and no situation here. If you could go back and seed Sarah Grey as an important part of Jean's life who is in more than 3 issues of the Marvel Universe, then I would have been interested in visiting the universe where this happened instead of Jean Grey's revival. But what do you guys think? Do you prefer how it went down? Let me know, and I'll see you in the future. Have a good one.